This is such a sick thing to be able to do. Like, this is exactly why I've been like so impressed with you recently. It's like stuff like this. This is insanely heartful. This is like the heartiest jam ever, and it's the kind of thing that a lot of poker players, regardless of how good they are, just don't have the conviction to be able to pull the trigger here. What's up, guys? In this video, you're going to see me do a 1 hour long interview with Cameron Blazevich, one of my students who just came 32nd in the main event of the WSOP 2022. We talk about a lot of stuff in this interview, everything from his journey, taking up poker seriously in the first place, coaching, his academic path to getting really good at the game, because he is a very strong player now, as well as his journey in the WSOP this year, like what it was like to have such a deep run. We review 5 key hands that he played, and we talk about those technically, but also really think about the way he was feeling, the pressure of going through such a big tournament. And then we finish off with a few tips from him, some advice about what he would recommend that you guys do and don't do to follow in his footsteps and become a professional poker player. So I hope you guys enjoy the interview. Do let me know what you think. Do remember to smash the like button, and let's get started. Cameron Blazevich, the mustached warrior, welcome to Carrot Corner. Welcome back from your epic voyage, your journey. Your 32nd place finish at the WSOP 2020 main, right?
Yep, 32nd. Yeah, thanks for having me.
It's been a pleasure. I figured we should start by introducing you. Unfortunately, the first 31 people of the main didn't get back to my request to do a YouTube video, so we're left with you. Just kidding. You've been my student for what, 2 years? Remind me.
Just over 2 years, yeah, like 2 years, 3 months, something like that. So
Yeah.
about 2 years.
So to me, this is like proud dad moment. It's like the first student I've ever had that's run this deep in the main. And I know I didn't even train you to play tourneys. Obviously we did. We learned cash games. You're primarily a cash game player, is that right?
Yeah, definitely.
But nevertheless, I'm very proud. So maybe we start by taking this from the beginning. What were your initial steps like in poker? And am I right in saying that when I met you, you were like extremely new to the game?
I was certainly new to playing the game well. I have like sort of played for a while, but just like completely recreationally, like no idea what I'm doing. Good enough to like win live 1-2, but at like a small win rate.
Yeah.
And I've kind of always wanted to play poker for a living, like since I was younger, like since back in the day, like when poker's on ESPN and like Poker After Dark was like the epitome of poker, I guess. I think a lot of people kind of experienced that. At least people my age, your age, went through something similar.
I mean, I'm flattered that you decided to like call us the same age there, because I don't think we are. How old are you?
How old are you? I'm 31.
I am 36 now. So.
Oh, wow. Yeah,
I mean,
you are a little ancient.
I'm very ancient. Complete dinosaur. We met probably in like 2020. I think I was doing a lot. Yeah, I think I was doing a lot of coaching.
Yeah.
At the time, and I remember getting very bored with like looking at the same PowerPoint. So one week I just decided to make like a new PowerPoint theme for every student. But I was like choosing within the generic PowerPoint themes that popped up, and the one I just clicked on the day I met you had dinosaurs all over it. Remember, it had like a big T-Rex on the front and a Stegosaurus. It was like you just walked into a nursery or a 5-year-old like learning how to color in or something. It had that kind of vibe. So talk us through your early poker journey, like when I know that you were into the game before, like recreationally, but what was it like to start taking the game seriously? And what did you do? And how did you decide to get poker tuition?
I guess like right when COVID happened, that's sort of when I reached out to you. COVID kind of just made me realize that like everything can kind of just be taken away from me right away kind of thing. And I, for whatever reason, just decided like, I don't really want to be old and like wish I never sort of went for it. Went for something like I always wanted to do. So I sort of like, okay, so what's my first step if I actually want to take poker seriously? And it's like, well, I should probably hire a coach, because learning it on my own is clearly not working, right? Like I'm just like, haven't made any progress in 10 years or whatever. So I decided to hire a coach. I really liked your From the Ground Up course on Run It Once, which is like, I really liked your teaching style in that course, and I thought it resonated well with me. So then I found out you did private coaching, and I reached out to you and was kind of just like, hey, like how early is too early to get coaching? Like I'm really terrible. Do I need to be like at a certain level in order to start coaching and get anything out of it? And you were kind of just like, no, in fact, the earlier the better, probably. So we started with like very, very, very basic stuff. Like what is a value bet? Stuff like that. And then from there, slowly but surely, I guess, sort of added more complexity to it, started understanding range interaction and things like that. And then maybe about a year into us working together, maybe a little less, you released some of your Carrot Poker School stuff. that was like, it was basically everything that we had been doing in one-on-ones, but in a sort of more formalized, easier to digest kind of, I guess, like more like rigorous or like academic, I think would be like a decent way to describe it. And that was just like a really, really great sort of style for my learning preference or whatever. So that seemed to like really hit home with me. And I think like I just made really huge strides once I sort of enrolled in the school.
Yeah. And I don't think that's uncommon, that people trying to learn on their own without structure, the ideas maybe make sense when they hear them and they can understand the concepts, but there's just not quite enough order there to get things where they need to be.
Yeah, like I think just like having homework and like actually doing exercises for stuff that I had just learned just like really helped cement it in my brain kind of thing. And so it kind of helped it all stick a bit more than just like our one-on-ones. I would do the lesson, I would rewatch them a few times throughout the week, but it just seemed like it wasn't sticking as well as sort of once there was these like assignments that kind of helped me just like really clarify the previous lesson and kind of lock it all into my brain.
Yeah. The Carrot Poker School is now available, guys. It's a video course. What Cameron's referring to there is like in the early days, it was a live course where you had to sort of sit there awkwardly with 12 other people on a Zoom call. Now you don't have to do that. You can watch from the privacy of your own room. And yeah, just grab it on your laptop and chill out and watch some lectures without having to like be asked questions randomly. I think I would put students on the spot and things back in those days, right? It was like very classroom style, but we still kept the spirit of the homework, the exam at the end with a feedback video and stuff like that. So of course, yeah, check out the Carrot Poker School over at carrotcorner.com. Guys, I really think that poker has been a badly taught subject for a long time. So many courses, training sites out there that give you an absolute medley of different random content day after day. There's no structure, there's no organization. You're jumping from one thought to another by following along with a live play session. There's almost nothing that's created in a pre-prepared academic way. And that's why I was so incentivized to bring you the Carrot Poker School. Not only do we use presentations to make sure that all ideas are actually translated into concepts, figures, graphics and hand examples and give you the right amount of each, but we also make sure that the syllabuses of our courses flow from episode to episode, not moving at a pace that you guys can't handle. The Carrot Poker School is fully comprehensive. It takes you from the start to the end. By the time you've completed grade 3, there's really nothing that you don't know about the theory of cash game poker. This is so much more efficient than just watching training content from a subscription site that bombards you with random stuff every day. Carrot Poker School will make sure that you learn at the right pace and that there's absolutely nothing missing in your game. We do not bombard you with extra information that you don't need. We just give you everything you need, and that's a lot, and that's why the Carrot Poker School is 33 hours long. We lead you down the path to success gradually and carefully, making sure that you get feedback every step of the way. This is a revolutionary course, guys. I'm incredibly proud to have brought it to you, and you can check it out over at carrotcorner.com. You can save £500 today by picking up our full scholarship and learning cash game poker the right way. I remember there being a point when we worked together where things just began clicking for you a lot. Like I feel like you were always making like slow, kind of gradual, solid progress, but then all of a sudden, I think things maybe I noticed them just come together and there was suddenly like a big leap in your understanding and in your ability. Did you feel that as well?
I guess, I mean, it's kind of hard. It kind of all feels like so incremental for me. Like, I think it's kind of like when you look in the mirror every day, you don't really notice changes that may be occurring like over time. Right. But I definitely, I mean, when I look back, it's poker's so hard, at least for me personally, to like measure progress until like I look back at like a video I made like 3 months ago or like 6 months ago or something. And then I just watch it and I'm like, oh, like I've come so far since then, you know? But it's just, I mean, it's just a crazy game where it's just like the feedback, like you don't know if you can trust the feedback. Like, it's just, it's really hard for me personally to like see progress being made without going back several months or whatever.
Well, I definitely think that your progress was really steady, but also not totally linear. I think there was a point where I noticed a big acceleration. But yeah, I take your point. It is like that. It's like looking in the mirror and being like, holy shit, like this was me 6 years ago. This is me now. It's more like that than it is like every day you notice massive strides, for sure. So what happened with your professional approach to poker then, like career-wise? There was a time where you decided to just go from an aspiring, keen, hard-working poker player to an actual professional, and you started doing this full-time. Do you want to talk a bit about that decision? What was that like, and was that quite a difficult decision to come to?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I guess we talked about it in our one-on-ones for like a few weeks, and then one day I think I just showed up. I was like, "Hey, by the way, I put in my 2 weeks at my job," and you're like,
Mhm.
"Oh boy." But I think what was really crucial for me is the fact that I have access to like really good live games around where I live. Because I think if I were just trying to do it all online, I don't think it would have been very feasible. So like just the fact that I had access to these live games where I could sort of study a lot, use online for like getting reps and training and just like trying to get better, and then sort of using the live poker arena more so to like make money to pay rent and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It was definitely intimidating, but it was just something I just really wanted to do. And I knew that, I mean, luckily for me, sort of the way that my life turned out, I was working as a software engineer for like the last 5 or 6 years. So I knew that if my sort of leap into poker just crashed and burned entirely, I had like a pretty decent fallback plan, right? Like I could always go back. Engineers are sort of always in demand. I could always go back and get a job whether I wanted to or not. I had a safety net, which was nice, but it was still quite intimidating. All of my friends kind of thought I was like a little crazy, but they kind of know my personality, and they sort of trusted that like if I were going to do it, I had a decent chance at success, I guess. And so far it's been okay. Hasn't been super smooth. It's been rough in some spots, and then it's been great in other spots. And so like, I mean, I'm still only about a year and a half into being like officially whatever it is, jobless, I guess professional.
Let's not call it jobless. That just gives
Yeah, that sounds bad.
the
Yeah,
outside world people who think poker's not a viable career what they want, right? We're not giving them that.
true.
They don't get that.
Yeah. Okay, good, good. Yeah, it was like, I mean, I'm working, honestly, I'm working way harder than I was working when I was working, quote unquote
Hmm.
working, right?
Yeah.
But it's so much more fun. Like I wake up and I'm like excited to like get to my computer and start studying and like looking at hands, and instead of like waking up and laying in bed and be like, oh man, I have to get up in 5 minutes. So I
Hmm.
have to go like sit at my computer and get on a Zoom meeting with some people at the office. It's just so different. So I love it, man. It's way more work, and I don't know. I just wouldn't have it any other way, honestly.
Yeah. I mean, that is one thing that poker has always promised is freedom, do what you love, and be your own boss as well, right? You can sort of decide your own hours. You can study when you feel like studying. You can play when you feel like playing, and you don't have to do things that you don't want to do at any given moment. Okay, you need some discipline to some extent. What was it? What was it like? Just before we move on, we will talk about this very deep run that you made in the 2022 WSOP Main eminently. But what was it like trying to balance your time, set aside study time, play time, and keep yourself accountable to have the right work ethic to succeed at this? Because it sounds like you are well and truly succeeding at this so far. So what did you get right, do you think?
That's a good question. It's quite tough to sort of, when you don't have to do something, it can be tough to, like, if you have all this stuff you should do, but you don't really have to do it. It's pretty easy to sort of just slack off and not do it. But luckily, I think I went through this like really weird phase of my life where I was like, listen, do you know who David Goggins is?
No.
Well, he's like this Navy SEAL who wrote a book, and he's just all about like, he's a super intense, hardcore guy. And he's just all about like discipline and all this crazy stuff. But I went through this like period of my life where I thought like his way to live life was like the way to live life. And that kind of, I think it at least trained me to be able to have discipline and like stick to a schedule and a routine. And I think also for me, like I'm really big into routines and schedules. And so like I have a daily schedule, and I have like set times for when I'm going to be studying and set times for when I'm going to be doing whatever, playing and things like that. So like I think just a combination of sort of like factors that I had like built into my life before I decided to quit like the more structured job and go into kind of the more free job. I think like it just kind of, I had like a framework set up that enabled success, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's really cool. So you'd sort of gain the life skills, the grit, the determination, the ability to actually force yourself to do what you know you need to do outside of poker, and then you'd used it within poker. So it sounds like this Goggins guy helped you somewhat on that path with that mantra, even though it sounds like you've maybe stepped back from the full-blown live like a Marine kind of ethos of late.
Yeah. Yeah,
Cool.
he's super intense. Like he's talking about like he's like, if it's basically like, he used to like wake up at 3 a.m. if it was storming out in the winter time so that he could do his run at like the worst time possible when it was like the most miserable, and stuff like that. Like he was just like, just try to make everything as hard as it can be and then do it, which is, I think there's some merit to it, but I think maybe a more sane approach is just
How
as beneficial.
How far did you go with that sort of thing when you were doing your training, your resilience training? Did you ever go out for a run in the thunderstorm or anything like that at 3 a.m.?
No, luckily in Texas here, like the weather is generally pretty mild, but I was training for a marathon at the time, and I still have, actually, I just found it the other day. I have this like sheet of like my marathon training, and I didn't miss any of the workouts. And I was also like weight training, which you aren't supposed to do at the same. So I'd like do 2-a-days. I'd like weight train in the morning and then run, or run in the morning and then weight train in the evening. And then I would go out to run when it was like 100, I guess you don't have
100 degrees is like, yeah,
100
I know
degrees,
how hot
like
that
40
is. It's
Celsius.
pretty damn hot.
It's like
yeah.
40. I would like choose the time hottest in the afternoon to like go do my 7-mile run or whatever, just because I thought that that was a good idea. I don't know. It was pretty foolish, but I think it really did kind of build some pathways or make me more resilient in a lot of different ways.
And that's what you need in poker. You need resilience, because poker will do the equivalent to a 100-degree 7-mile run to you pretty frequently. Will make you feel the same kind of suffering, maybe not physically, but to a large extent mentally. Yeah, cool. So that takes us to, obviously the audience has been looking at these two queens on the screen for the first 15 minutes of this interview, and they're wondering what went on here. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what it was like to sit down at the WSOP Main? And this is day 3, right? Where you're getting close to the bubble here, where you have these queens. But maybe you can take us through the tournament up until that point, and then we'll jump into the action here with the 2 red queens.
Yeah, basically, I don't have a ton of experience playing tournaments. So the small sample that I do have, like I played a few local tournaments, and that's kind of it. Basically, all I knew about tournaments was that like the hands seem super amplified. Like everything about a hand seems way, way more important than it does in a cash game in a certain way, because you just can't reload basically. So it's like all of a sudden every hand just like means the world to you. And so that was kind of heading into the main event. I was like, okay, I know in these like stupid $600 monthly tournaments, I know how like anxiety ridden I get over a certain hand or whatever. I just expected the main to be like that on steroids kind of. So sit down day 1 and I'm like super nervous. After a few orbits, I just realized like nobody here really knows what's going on kind of thing. So that kind of like allowed me to like sink into my comfort zone a little bit. Like it's really easy to look at the main and be like, oh, it's a 10K tournament. It's going to be full of crushers. But I think just the nature of the main is just like, there's just a lot of people there. It's got to draw like the most recreationals. Well, definitely for any 10K, but I mean, it's just like, what is it? Like almost 10,000 people enter the tournament. Most of them are just like people who play in home games with their friends on the weekends, it seems like. So my nerves sort of faded a bit once I looked around and realized like, okay, I'm not out of my depth here. I can hold my own, at least at the initial table on day 1. And then I realized like everybody was just playing so tight. Like everybody was like so tight. Like people folded pocket kings. I guess one hand, I don't know if we need to get into it, but this will just sort of, it'll just like illuminate like how day 1 was going, and how I sort of got this feeling that like everybody was like really sort of puckered up, I guess is how I describe it. One hand, like this was on like level 2 of the entire tournament, like cutoff opens, button 3 bets, and I called 4 bet with ace king suited, and button just folds pocket kings.
Wow.
Like pre-flop. So I was just like, okay, this is a whole different sort of game here on day 1 at least, right? And then what I heard from other people after that was like, day 1 people are really tight, day 2 people loosen up, day 3 the money bubble comes, so people tighten up again. And that's kind of like the general rule I heard about the tournament. I have no idea if it's true, right? I have sample size of 1, so I don't know. But I would say that kind of is in line with what I experienced.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, people are like, the last thing you want is to buy in for a tournament that's way above your normal buy-in and then just get busted like at the start of day 1. It's just probably just a terrifying feeling. So were you feeling in the initial sort of 2 days, I think this hand that's on our screen comes from day 3, by day 2, were you feeling like in your element? Were you playing like as you would normally play in your local game and stuff like that? Or were you still feeling like a bit nerve-wracked about the prospect of busting at some point?
A bit of both. I think I was definitely feeling more comfortable and just realizing that like I think I have an edge against most of the people I'm playing against, which was nice. You could just see people making pretty egregious errors throughout the first few days. Well, actually throughout much of the tournament, I guess. But still definitely super nervous. Like it was like a way bigger buy-in than anything I've ever played. And like the stage and the ambiance and everything was just like, it was a lot.
Poker's such a weird game, right? Because it's like, you're classically schooled, you've been through a carrot poker school, you've had like lots of one-to-one coaching from me. I'm one of the most like academic coaches around. I'm kind of like old school that way. I want my students to learn like the nuts and bolts of the game, and yet you're playing in this field where so many of your opponents are used to playing for that amount of money. The money isn't an issue to them. It's not like a brand new thing like it was to you, that level of buy-in. Yet they have no classical training, and they're just, they may as well be beginners. Like what does that feel like to be like, I am less used to this than they are. I'm not used to playing for this amount of money, but I know lots of things that they don't know. Very strange thing. I don't think that would happen in many other sports or games, right? Poker's quite unique in that respect.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I guess that kind of explains why like business guys in the cash games, you know, like always trying to play like as high as possible against like pros, and it's like because that's kind of how they can mitigate some of the edge a bit, is just get them out of their comfort zone, in the sense of like if a pro is sort of underrolled in a certain spot, he's potentially not going to be playing to the best of his ability. So it kind of makes sense. I imagine there's some sort of equivalence there. I don't know. I'm not sure. But anyway, so yeah, the first couple of days, I actually got all in on day 2 for my tournament life with pocket tens against ace king and held. So that was and I mean, I flop a 10, but he flops a gut shot. So like he had less outs going to the turn, but still it was just like so nerve wracking. But yeah, I mean, I easily could have been out day 2, you know, like just the coin flips the other way. And I'm just out of the tournament day 2 instead of making it all the way to day 7.
People say you have to be really lucky and you have to play really well to win a tournament. I don't think you have to play really well. I think you definitely have to be really lucky, and it helps to play really well, like to play your best.
Yeah.
But let's get into this queen's hand. So this is day 3.
Sure.
And at this point, what's the sort of, talk us through the general situation here, blinds wise? How comfortable are you? What's going on? What do you know about the villain in question here? Let me go through the pre-flop action first, actually. If you're just listening to this, I'll narrate it as well in case you're just listening instead of watching. But the low jack goes ahead. This is Cameron, and the low jack goes ahead and min raises. And that's the 10k blind. So 3k, 5k seems kind of strange, but okay.
Yeah.
3k, 5k. And big blind calls. And we are 190k or 200k effective, I guess, at the start of this hand. What do you know about big blind in any context here?
Big blind has been kind of running the table over a bit. He's been playing super aggressive, and he just kind of stares everybody down, it's a little awkward, but he's been playing really aggressive. And I think we'll see why this is important in just a second, but I've actually seen him like lead on turns that are good for his range, like on 2 occasions prior to this hand. For instance, like he defends a big blind and then donks a board that's good for him, or he calls a C bet and then donks a turn that's good for him. So I've seen him do it twice prior to this hand. And I guess that's important because, well, I guess we can get there.
Yeah, go ahead. So flop comes 6-8, 6 two-tone. He checks. We bet 10k into 38, which seems normal to me. I mean, small C bets and at this stage of a tournament are definitely fine. I'm sure you can bet bigger here as well.
Yeah. But
I won't get lost in the weeds of that. Then 8 of clubs turn comes, which is kind of the hallmark of a turn that is good for the big blind, who has way more ATEX than we do as a concentration of their range, right? And then he goes ahead and bets 30k, so this falls in perfectly with the read you've already specified. It actually reminds me of like the student that I teach range advantage to, or I teach like assessing a turn card and like what kind of world is it? Is it favorable, unfavorable, neutral, etc.? You know all of this, of course, from your Carrot Poker School education. But sometimes when the student first learns that, they can get blinded or obsessed by the idea of like range advantage and just go, turn is good for me, therefore I go nuts now with like whatever I have. I don't think about what I have. I don't think about bluff selection. I don't think about even how much showdown value I have. Sometimes I've seen people lead the middle of their range big here because the card is good for their range, and like total misapplication, you know, it can happen. How skilled was this player? Like, I don't want you to like get into trouble here and like say he's a complete whale and you may be watching. But
I think he was actually probably one of the stronger players at the table. But I just think like this is also something I kind of learned from you. It's just like if there's a player who's done something a few times, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're getting out of line, but it means it's maybe more likely that they could be getting out of line. Sort of if a player bets pot on a flop, if you've only seen one hand and he bets pot on a flop, it doesn't mean that he's a maniac, but it means he's at least in a pool of people that could be a maniac. That makes sense. So I just thought that like, it doesn't mean that he's just like, because I've seen him lead twice, it doesn't mean that he's just getting way out of line, but it means that potentially, like how often, I mean, does he really hit I mean, of course he could, but in order for him to lead, this is this 3rd time leading, right? So like, does it really, I guess, like, is it more likely that he's hit all 3 spots and that's why he's led? Or is it more likely that like he just understands the spots and leads with hands that can lead type of thing?
And it's the kind of thing where you need to be careful, right? Because if your motivation for leading is, this is good for my range, I'm going to rep this, you may accidentally only do it with bluffs. You might not actually remember to do it with your value hands, or you might not want to. You might just routinely check, you know, the instinct to deceive your opponent is strong. You may just check with your value hands, right? So I actually think that not only is this a huge read, like, and I think it is very reliable, someone that's capable of leading on the turn and has already done it twice in this sort of spot is far more likely to be over bluffing this situation than somebody who you've not seen do it yet. Just a normal rareness theorem, I guess. And then you could start by saying, well, in theory, like our hand is a call anyway, so we don't even have to think about folding this hand yet in game theory. So clearly we're not going to adjust the other way and fold. So I guess really clear call. But I think it's where the river where this really gets like super interesting, which is the king of spades. and I think when you face this and villain jams for everything, that's basically your last 150k. Pot is 108,000 and he jams for 150,000 chips effective. And this is our tournament life that's on the line, not his, which is quite interesting here. So how would you analyze, how did you feel when you faced this jam? Take us through chronologically the reation of you sitting at this table, seeing this jam for all of the money. And then how did your thought process evolve in the next like 30 seconds or so?
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess right before he jammed, he like stared at me extra long and then went all in. And as soon as he went all in, I think I just said out loud, like, oh boy, or something like that. Or like, oh man. And he really put me in the tank. Oh man. And okay, I guess like I had folded, like there had been a couple hands where he had bet big on the river against me earlier in the day. And I had made what I thought were like relatively big folds, but it's just a spot where like his range was just doing so much better than mine. I just didn't think that he'd be able to like find enough bluffs in a certain spot. Right. So it could be again that he was just like using the board to his advantage and bluffing me out of spots. And so he'd seen me make big folds before. So I knew that this is live poker 101, right? I knew that he knew that. But
it's like, I'm out of here. I just retire from the interview at this point. You're no longer speaking my language.
Yeah, like he had seen me make folds before against big bets on the river. So I figured that could weigh into him potentially having some bluffs here and then for having more bluffs than he should. And really like it was just a spot where I sort of took that into account. I took into account, like, I thought it was really strange how long he stared at me before he went all in. I was like, it seemed like he was trying to suss something out. And like, if he has a value hand, I just didn't think he would stare at me that long.
It's kind of unnaturally like out of your way act to do with a value hand. Like maybe you do a little bit of staring, but to go into like a massive OTT stare with a value hand is a bit unorthodox. I agree.
Yeah.
Technically speaking, so that's the sort of psychological analysis, which I think all of these things are pointing towards call. Technically speaking, though, for villain to have an 8 here, like, yeah, they have some combos, but like they're only really repping, I guess maybe a 6 as well, but they're saying they have minimum a 6. I doubt whether people would find this play with a 6 in reality very frequently, so I would think mainly Atex, although a 6 could do this, I guess, technically. And I think a lot of beginners here might freak out because a king came, but the king is like very bricky, right? It's like if they are bluffing turn, the king is the card they actually fold on the flop the most. Ostensibly, it's a card that's not really natural to lead turn with, so I think the king is like an absolute brick. You have to see this card as like kind of an uber brick, right? That doesn't really, it shouldn't be perceived as an overcard to our queens, basically. So yeah, I really love the call. I think it's great. When you showed me this hand earlier before we went live, I really liked this one. I think it was my favorite one of the ones you sent over. So I agree that like read-wise and technically, this looks like a call. Was it hard to pull the trigger, just given the absurd stakes of this hand? Like, what did that feel like?
Yeah, it was very hard. Like, I had talked myself into a call probably like 30 seconds before I actually put the chips out. Like, I had to kind of work up the courage to put the chips out even after I decided that it was a call. It's just a spot where I was just like, man, I could fold and I'm still in the tournament, you know, and I call and he rolls over an 8 or a 6, like, and I'm just like, oh, I didn't have to call there, you know? But I think just like, I kind of just convinced myself that like, you're here, you told your friends, like, if you think you're right in a spot, you're just going to go for it. You're not going to let this, like, the stakes get to your head. And I think I'm right in the spot, so I'm just going to go for it. And then I kind of just put it out there. And then, luckily.
Well, if you'd lost, there may only be one hand to this interview.
Yeah.
And villain shows the 10-7 offsuit man tournament. Big blind defense ranges, huh? Something else. But fair enough.
I mean, I guess you get to just be super wide. Like, everybody's been opening, and there's a big blind ante out there. So,
no rake.
No rake. Yeah, no rake.
Pager rake already at the start. So makes sense. Yeah, I really like the play. How did villain? Did you watch his heart shatter into 1,000 pieces upon calling?
He actually did get a bit tilted after this one, and
yes.
Yeah. The guy next to me was like, "Oh wow, good call," and I was like, "Yeah." I mean, honestly, I'm just kind of happy he didn't have it. It'd suck if he rolls over. That's a great
response. Like, not even doing like that whole like arrogant reg thing of like, yeah, well, you know, he ripped so thin in that spot. Like, you could have said something like that, but you were just like, mate, honestly, I'm just super happy I won the chips and didn't lose the chips. Like, that's such a great response. That's
exactly, so yeah. And the guy was like, the villain in the hand was like, like, because I said, oh, I'm just like, you know, he could have easily had an 8 there or whatever. Like, I kind of just to the guy next to me, and he's like, "Oh, I would have happily done it with a 6 too." And I'm like, "Yeah, well, of course you would, like." But I don't know. I didn't like go into my thought process and explain sort of what got me to the call. But yeah, obviously he's got a bunch of good hands on that board. Like, well, maybe not a bunch, but he's got more good hands than I do, I would say, right? More like full houses and stuff. So
yeah,
it was, yeah, I don't
people
know. But
love
yeah,
to say that. Like, I would have done it with an 8. I would have done it with a 6.
Yeah.
But like, who knows? Like, some people will only have air when they choose this sizing. So if you have really good live read on someone, right? It could even be that if they have an 8, they don't choose this line because they feel like it's overfolded, or they want to try to they like the feeling of being called too much, so they want to try and increase the call frequency, even though that's not really what you should do. But yeah, I mean, great job. Just in the interest of getting through more hands, let's speed up slightly. So let's pull up the next one, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
So this one with kings, we have villains cards here because this just ended up being an all-in. But these kinds of hands that maybe aren't technically like super rich can be so pivotal to your entire tournament in these spots. So set the scene for this one. How close are you to the money here, and how did this one feel?
This one really, I mean, once we see it, it kind of all looks standard, but in the moment, based on the context and everything, it was pretty big. So I actually have a decent stack here. I think I have like around 80 bigs or something like that. And the only guy at the table that covers me is the big blind. And we are about 120 people away from the money. So I think it was something like 1,800 make the money or something. I don't remember exactly how many made the money, but we're basically sort of nearing the bubble, right? Like 120 people out of 10,000 like entrants. So we're very close to the bubble here. And the only covering stack at the table is the big blind. And he opens under the gun. I'm sorry, not the big blind, my fault. The under the gun player opens under the gun, and he's the only covering stack. And it folds to me, and I have kings. So I 3-bet naturally. And then he 4-bets me. And I'm sitting here like, well, we're 120 away from the money. Like, I can just fold my way into the money. I've never played a 10K before. It's the difference between $15,000 and $0. But like, I have kings. I can't fold kings. I'm all in against the only covering stack. And he basically says, there's too much money out there. I can't fold. And he calls. And so now we're like 20% to just basically bubble the tournament,
Apparently you're 34% to bubble the tournament. You're never as far ahead in poker as you think, right? Look at that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if that's...
I mean, pre-flop odds, I don't know. Who cares? I don't teach
pre-flop
odds,
sure.
but yeah.
Sure. Yeah, okay, yeah. So we're 30. So yeah, 1 out of 4 times or whatever. I can't even... Yeah, 1 out of 3 times we bubble, which is kind of crazy. And I mean, I have so many chips. I don't know. It just felt like a crazy spot. But so yeah, I mean, you got to win these, right? And then we win this one, and now we've got like 150, 160 bigs or something.
So now, how does that feel?
On the bubble.
Like, you're basically safe, you're immune, and you're going to have a massive stack like going into the post-bubble phase of this. And also you're going to be able to like apply a ton of pressure, right, in the bubble here for the next couple of rounds.
Everyone else at our table is relatively short, at least compared to us two, relatively short. There's like a lot of like 30 BB stacks at our table at this point. So yeah, now I'm excited. I get to start opening tons of hands, and nobody wants to play against me because they all want to sneak it. They all are going through the same sort of thought process I was just going through of like $0, $15,000. We can fold our way to the money. Man, it was crazy, dude. The actual like last 100 people to the bubble, people just tanked. Like I was calling clock every hand on every person. It was crazy. It was like the least fun thing I've done in poker, I think. Like, people would just sit there pre-flop, and I would give them like a minute, then I would call clock. The guy would come over, he'd count them down, and they would fold their hand, and they'd go to the next guy, and he'd do the exact same thing.
That's like so broken. It almost feels like something has to happen there. There needs to just be some kind of rule where you get like warned and then chucked out of the tournament or something. I mean, I don't know, it'd be impossible to enforce. And before the comments are just like, oh, you can't do that. But like, clearly there needs to be like something that stops it being ruined that way. So anyway, really sweet double up spot. The next hand, I believe, is post bubble, right?
The next hand is post bubble, yeah.
Okay, so let's move to that now, and I'll ask you at that point what that feels like to make the money. We'll go from there. So what was the feeling like when you realized you were in the money? Was it quite short-lived, like that sense of relief since you had so many chips anyway? Or was it like a real sense of ecstasy or jubilation that you were making at least 15,000?
It was like, it did take a lot of the pressure off in a weird way. I mean, I had some friends buy my action. They basically kind of sent me to the tournament. And so I was like, oh, I didn't lose all my friends' money, which was cool. So that felt nice to just be like, okay, we're guaranteed some money. And then I realized like, hey, we actually have a decent amount of chips. Let's see what we can do. Let's get after it.
We have 13 million at this point with the blinds at 60K, 120K. How many are left at this point?
So this is day 6. I think
Less
there's
than 100 people on day 6, right? Wow.
yeah, less than 100. There might actually even been like less than 60 or something at this point. I'm pretty sure I was like in top 5 in chips right when this hand started, actually, which was top 5 with like 60 people or whatever. It was crazy. I mean, people were coming out of the woodwork, like messaging me, like people I haven't heard from in years, just like, hey, good luck, man. We heard you're in the tournament.
That's so cool. Did it get into your head at all? Were you in your own head about like final tabling and winning the main event at this point, or were you trying to just like stay focused on the here and now?
I mean, I was pretty just locked in on like, it's crazy how focused I felt throughout this tournament. I think it's just a combination of stakes and sort of just it's the main event, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It was super mentally draining for sure because it was just like super long days, just back to back to back to back. But luckily, everybody in the tournament was experiencing sort of the same thing. So everybody would be tired at the end of the day. People would make mistakes. But I've never felt like so focused while playing poker as I did during like, especially the last few days of the tournament when like stakes are getting actually really high. Every hand is just so critical.
I remember the tension in the Discord group because we had a channel in the Carrot Poker Discord group called The Moustache Ride, and
Right.
I'm sure you saw that. And we were just a bunch of the guys in there were just literally staying up all night, railing you from afar. And every morning when I logged on to see how you were doing, and you were still there, or you were like 4th in chips with 30 to go or whatever, I just remember thinking like, holy shit, like he could actually do this. I had a feeling that you were going to win the main, like everybody did. Because it's bias, right? It's like our guy.
Sure.
He's in the main. He's going to win.
I thought
of
I was
course
going to win too.
Right, there you go.
Yeah, it was really cool to see everyone in the Discord like following along and cheering me on. And yeah, it was just really cool to sort of have the whole community behind me. That felt awesome.
It was an awesome time. We were so thrilled that like one of our guys, and someone who's active, you know, you're active in our community as well. It's not like you're just somebody that sits on the sidelines and then like pops up when they're in the main. Everyone knows you and stuff. So to see you get this far was super exciting. So we have 6s on the button here, and it gets opened to 250k by the hijack. We make the call, which I think is fine. I mean, there's probably an argument for being able to 3-bet here as well if you want to, but call seems good. Call is the natural play, right? It's like the whole, I don't want to inflate pots against someone with 9.75 million chips when there's all these short stacks to pick off, and it seems like the tempting thing to do here, for sure. Flopping a set. How does it feel to flop a set at this point when you're battling another big stack? That must be a huge feeling.
Yeah, it's like one of the best feelings. It's like one of the best feelings in the world. It's kind of hard to explain, but you're just like, all right, like let's go, you know? It felt incredible. It's like I always tell people there's like no better feeling than like turning a set in like a 3-bet pot.
Yeah.
After you c-bet and you get called and like you're in bad shape because like you only c-bet the board because it's like good for your range, but
suddenly
like,
you have a set. Yeah.
Suddenly you turn a set and it's just like the pot's huge and you have a set on the turn and he's already called once. So like he's got, so I don't know. Flopping sets is obviously a great feeling. Turning sets I love as well. But flopping sets here in the main on day 6 against a big stack when I also have piles of chips. Definitely a really, really good feeling.
Yeah. So villain bets. And I guess my question is, are you building a raising range here? I guess we'll find out in just a second. So you decide to call. Anything that went into that decision, like that sort of swayed you one way or the other, or were you fairly like indifferent between the two here?
Honestly, I was fairly indifferent. I don't know. I can see arguments for both sides, for raising and for flatting, I think. So this is a thing where, like you said, I mostly play cash. The bet sizes and stuff in tournaments, I'm not super used to. So like all these really small bet sizes that get used, I'm kind of out of my depth when it comes to that. Like in a cash game, if you bet super small, I think like raising becomes like more attractive. But then again, like we're in position, urgency is not as high as it could be.
So possibly slow playable because of the positional good old Carrot Poker School terms. We're going to get highly theoretical here, but there's less pressure, less urgency for you to build a pot, as you say, when you're in position, because you'll always have the chance to bet turn after they check. That isn't true if you're out of position. That's why out of position could be considered a pure raise. I think like one thing I could say to you here from a coaching standpoint, briefly, though it's not my aim today to coach you, I want to more hear about your experiences, but you could always just say, well, what villain checked? Would I have a betting range? And if the answer is yes, then a bet this small is closer to a check than it is to a big bet. So it would follow from that even if you haven't studied this, you have studied facing a range check here. And if you would have a betting range against a range check, you should probably have some raising range against a really tiny range bet, if that's what he's doing. But yeah, anyway, I think both options are okay. I think 6s is definitely a common raise, but I don't think call is bad. 9 of hearts and 360, another kind of small bet at this point. And here we do throw in the raise to the 2 million. I think double flush draw, urgency is higher. Another small bet as opposed to a big one, urgency is higher. And yeah, like I can see just having a villain having a fairly mergy range here with the small sizing, like not going to be like mega polar. So generally we say, right, when our opponents are less polarized, we want to drive the action a bit more ourselves with the top of our range. So I like the raise. And now this is like the biggest fortune reversal, unexpected thing ever. You get like small clicked back here to 5.86 million. What's your initial reaction to getting 3-bet here? And then how did the next 30 seconds, same question as before, how did the next 30 seconds of your thought process go?
My initial reaction was just like, my range is just like so many sets. When I take my line, I just feel like I have a set so often. And then to see him 3-bet me on the turn, I just like alarm bells were going off, right? And like I have him covered, but barely, and we're both super deep. I mean, it really sent me into the tank. Like I started looking for hands he can be turning into bluffs here, and like even like, and then I started thinking like even if he did flop a set of jacks, I guess it makes sense for him to bet small. Like I think like a lot of times you'll check the turn with top set, but maybe on like a board like this, maybe he's just betting small with jacks. So I think maybe he could have jacks here. He could have 10-8 sometimes, but I wouldn't give him like a whole lot of 10-8 suited pre, but I could just be wrong about that. I just really thought that like my perceived range was just like so strong. So for him to be 3-betting me here just felt so incredibly strong, especially given that he's a big stack and I'm one of the people at the table that can stack him.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's crazy scary. Like, I mean, you're brave because you've come on to a YouTube channel full of YouTube audience people and you folded a set on YouTube. I mean, this is like some extremely brave shit right here.
Day 6 of the main for piles and piles and piles of chips.
You folded a set.
I make a set and I fold. Like, what am I doing?
Let's see how many people in the comments below are like, lol, fold set. What an idiot. Luckbox.
Oh man, you're telling me. It's the biggest fold I've ever made in my life. I tanked. It probably took me 5 minutes to fold. But I mean, I think also once I've tanked for like 4.5 minutes, what am I gonna do? Raise? I mean, I guess I could just put it in. But
like people are ripping the clocks off the walls of the playing hall and throwing them at you. Like at this point.
Yeah. Like luckily, I mean, everybody understands that like it's such a big spot that everybody's like really willing to give you time to think in a spot like this. Plus, like, it's not like I've been one of the guys at the table who's been taking a lot of time outside of this hand. But yeah, I really did. I'd be surprised if I thought for less than like 3 or 4 minutes here. And then I did end up folding. And the guy told me he would tell me after one of us busted. But we both made the next day. And then I didn't see him afterwards. I found him on Twitter.
You never know. Did you ever find out?
I found him on Twitter and I tweeted at him, but it doesn't look like he's super active. So I haven't found out yet. But maybe I'll send him this video.
So basically, you've been awake since this point, and in order to go back to sleep again, like to catch up on sleep, you need to know like what this guy had in this hand.
Yeah. It was kind of, I mean, obviously it's really exploitative, but it was hard for me to give this guy credit for bluffing in this spot. And like, if he is bluffing, like what's he bluffing with? Like, so he's got to have like a 10, like a jack 10 or something. I don't know.
So I'll give you my sort of coach input if you want it on what I think of this fold.
Yeah. No, I would love to hear it.
I think it's very easy to look at this spot and stop at the fact that you only lose to set over set and C2 flush draws and stop there and just say, therefore, folding is foolish or it's ludicrous or whatever. Just stick the rest in, you have a set. I think that's an incredibly easy thought process to have, and it's a very tempting one to have at this point in the tournament where you can sort of absolve yourself of responsibility with phrases like cooler, set over set, if it's the case, c'est la vie, etc. But kudos to you, you actually engaged with what you really truly thought was happening in this spot, which was that you were looking at 7s, jacks, or 9s most of the time with the occasional 10-8. And that's not a sparse amount of combinations. If you give him half the 10-8 and 3 other sets, that's like 11 combos. That's a ton of combos. I think the chances of a merging mistake happening here, unless the guy is an absolute baboon, are none. Like the merging mistake here with like kings, like doing this is just like basically ludicrous. Unless this guy is like Jamie Gold on a heater in like 2006 or whenever that was, it's just not happening, you know? And then secondly, the bluffs, like if you are bluffing,
I could have 10-8 suited, you know?
Sure,
like,
you can have 10-8 suited,
and I have so many sets.
If he does have like the king queen of spades here, it's still only one combo. The king queen of, like, the combo draws aren't that many combos, and they're pretty live against your hand. So even if you do give them a few combo draws, which I think is like unclear, unless you give them like quite a lot of draws here, it didn't even jam. They just like clicked it back some. It didn't jam.
Left like 3, a little over 3 behind.
Left a little over 3 and had the stones to just come at you here as a covered big stack against a fellow big stack when your range is undeniably terrifying. I think this is a great fold. I think this is a fold that you actually have to make if you want to keep playing your A game. And I think most people here would not be able to make this fold in this high pressure environment. And I think it's testament to the fact that you were super dialed into this event when you pulled the trigger on this fold. I actually don't even think you're folding to that small an amount of combinations of value in a spot where the cognitive temptation to bluff is just so negative. Like, it's such an adverse pull here away from wanting to bluff in this spot. So great job. I think this hand kept you in the tournament and got you that deep finish that you got in the end, that netted you that deserved prize. So yeah, good job.
I definitely had all those thoughts of like, well, I could just easily like chalk it up to it's just a cooler if he has a set and just put the money in. But I don't know, just didn't seem like that was seemed like I could do better than that, I guess.
So now that you can sleep at night again, I'm gonna say something that'll stop you being able to sleep. Imagine you had sevens here. How horrible would that have been? Holy shit. Anyway, let's move on. You can think about that tonight when you're in bed. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so a little bit later on. How many people are left now, Cameron?
I would say there's less than 50 left at this point in the tournament, probably. Still day 6. We had folded a set maybe a few hours ago. That hand we just looked at.
And because of that, you still have 11.6 million chips instead of like none. So that's good.
Yes. Yeah.
So here we are. We live to fight another day. We have ace-4 of spades in the low jack. I think that's called live. They have weird names for positions. I think it's called the low jack. And then folds around the big blind, who calls. The flop comes ace 10-10. We range bet small. They call. We have ace 4 of spades. The turn is the 9 of spades. I think check is how this is going to go. Thank you. If you like potted it there, I would have had to like stop the whole video and like not publish it.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, we'll see what you think by the time we get to the end of it.
So we hit the counterfeited. We hit the blocker to the rivered boat. That's what we've hit. We've hit a blocker on the river, right? So we river the blocker. Helmuth would like that. I got the blockers. Yeah. I got the blockers. Yeah.
And I guess I screwed up this hand replay. We have this guy covered, but not by a ton.
Okay, so he checks, and we are going to decide whether to value bet, I guess.
Yeah, I do think, like, looking back on his hand, I think this is just a check back, probably. Mm-hmm. But in game, I did decide to value bet. Yeah, I think the mistake here is probably value betting river.
Yeah, and I think the reason that it is a mistake is twofold. Like, one, you're reopening, obviously, right, which is why in equilibrium it wouldn't like it. 2, the river's the 4 of hearts, bringing in flushes, which is another bad thing and makes your hand thinner. And 3, villain has to bluff catch some things like 6s and stuff to like be calling often enough here, and I just don't think that people are going to do a great job of that. I agree with you. I think it's 100% a check back. So inaccuracy here with the river bet. I mean, after making such a great fold, I have to be able to criticize something, right? Like I can't just have you like go through the day with no blemishes against your name. So
well, I think it might even get worse. So don't worry.
And we get bomb raised. Well, it's not that huge. I mean, pot's already 2.4, so we get just over pot, something like that here. 2.4 million, a bit over pot. Yeah, crazy spot. So your real-time thought process, your 30-second reaction to this, and then your decision. What happened?
Sure. Yeah, basically I don't know, we'll see what you think about this one. Basically I was thinking like he was going to be check raising like all of his 10x, all of his flushes, and then some bluffs if he has them. He was a pretty aggressive player, but I mean, like, he's just pretty solid, I guess. I wouldn't say he was like overly aggressive or anything like that. But I sort of thought that all of his trips and all of his flushes would have to fold to jam. And I think that might actually hold true. I think like if I jam here, I get snapped by like 10-9, pocket 9s, ace 10, pocket 4s. I mean, outside of that, I think he's actually kind of in a shit spot, but could be wrong. And so I decided to go for it. And I 3-bet all in on the river.
This is such a sick thing to be able to do. Like, you've never even played an event like this before. This is exactly why I've been like so impressed with you recently. It's like stuff like this that not only are you seeing that like you have the 4 blocker, it's a spot where, you know, your opponent's going to have a very tough time in real life, like finding theoretical calls with bluff catchers, but you've been able to like pull the trigger when you yourself are, you know, putting most of your tournament at jeopardy here, right, with this jam. So yeah, this is insanely heartful. This is like the heartiest jam ever, and it's the kind of thing that a lot of poker players, regardless of how good they are, just don't have the conviction to be able to pull the trigger here. So yeah, this is really cool. What it will come down to is how much of villain's range it's bolts, and I think you get a feel for that on the flop, like if face 10 or 10-9, like how likely it is that that's slow playing if you feel like those hands are just not there very often. And I think you can just pick up on that instinctively, right? Like by the tempo with which they call flop or whatever. And then you block fours, which is the one that you can't do anything about, the one that is just going to get there, like every single time. You actually have the blocker to that. You block 2 of the 3 remaining combos of fours. I love this play. I think this play is great. I mean, I don't like the river bet to start with. I was terrified you were going to call the river here, which I would have hated as well. But the jam, I didn't even see it coming. I was just like, how's he going to justify a river call here? I really like this. I mean, if you run into 9s or 10, even if villain has, I don't know, the nut flush, I think it's a horrific spot to be in. Like with the nut flush here, like for sure.
Yeah, I thought he was gonna have to fold like almost his entire range here. I did get called, and you'll see what he has. But he goes, "Did you say all in?" He asked the dealer, "Did he say all in?" And he was like, "Yeah." Then he just snap calls, and he has quads.
Yeah, so your bluff was terrible because you failed to make him fold quads. Like, bad job. Exactly. Make him fold quads next time, you know?
And I just, like, my heart sunk, right? Because, like, now I'm left with kind of crumbs at this point. But this is one of the hands that I'm kind of most proud of that I played, even though I lost. Except for, I mean, I do go back to I guess, like, I'm not really proud of sort of the river bet, the initial one. But I think, like, just recognizing that, like, I think he's folding, like, almost his entire range to the shove. But, I don't know. Anyways, this hand was I don't know.
I mean, again, I can just offer my coach input in case it like further puts things to bed for you here and just like closes the chapter and helps you move on from this hand, because these hands are like, they're still going to live in your subconscious, right, for some time.
Oh, for sure. Yeah,
even if you don't explicitly think about them, they're going to be there, and like things will come up and you'll be like, that's like that hand where I had ace 4 of spades at the WSOP. You're going to remember these hands for way longer than you're going to remember like the hands you play on Ignition tonight or whatever. I think like the thing to say here about your fold equity on the river, I know I've already told you how much I love the play, but I think you're right, and you just have to try to come to terms with the fact that you made a really good play and you just ran into this super unlikely punish that makes your play look dumb. Poker is such a weird game where you can find a play that you wouldn't normally be capable of finding that's like your utmost A game. It's like proper decisiveness, like you're switched on. You just find a play that's normally tough for you to find and you execute it under pressure. You do everything right and you get snapped by quads.
Yeah,
like, talk about the disconnect between playing well and getting good feedback. This is the epitome of that. And that's why this game is so hard and so nerve-wracking for a lot of people. So a lot of people in your shoes will not make this play again, but because you went out running it in the 100-degree heat in the desert, like, you probably will be able to make this play again. Resilience. Good thing you listened to that dude you told me about at the start, right? Because I think you'll come back and do this again and it will work, and you'll do it again and it will work, and I don't think this is going to put you off, and I think that's the main thing. A lot of people would be put off by this result, and I don't think that's you, and that's a real strength.
I do think like throughout the tournament, like a lot of the reason why I was like winning chips was I was just finding cool spots to bluff that I guess most people just weren't. It just didn't seem like people were really finding a lot of bluffs. Like it seemed like people were playing really tight and really straightforward and like very face up, and it allowed me just to like sniff out spots where like they were super capped and I could just put a lot of pressure on them, especially once I had chips. Like once I had chips, I could just threaten everyone's tournament lives, and like I was like, wow, tournament poker's the best. But I guess tournament poker's fun when you have a big stack and no one else does.
Yeah, it's like there's that God syndrome, isn't it? Where like, especially when you were like on the bubble and you doubled up and you were just like winning every single pot, you just feel like a deity. You're just sat there and these like mortals are like running and scampering and you're like stomping on cities with your big stack. Like it's brilliant. All right, one last hand. So we are now, we're now kind of crippled, 7. Right? We're like, our stack has been destroyed.
Oh, here. Oh, actually, believe it or not, I ran it up after this.
Nice.
I had 7 bigs after this hand. I doubled and then like got all in like 5 times, got no calls, and then got all in with kings against jacks and got back up to like 15 million within a few hours.
That's so sick.
It was insane. It was insane. I couldn't believe it.
Okay, so let's join the action when you have recovered back up to 15 million. All right, so we have about 7. We'd obviously lost a few pots since rebuilding all the way up to 15. We've gone back down to 7 here. Blinds are 150k, 300k, and we have ace 10 of diamonds in the small blind. It gets raised by the hijack to 6-5. Called on the button. We shove, and we get called. So let's start with the decision to jam here. This is obviously not like not something I would say I'm specialized in, like pre-flop squeeze shoving ranges at this amount of big blinds. Like, I don't know, what 30 big blinds here or whatever we have, like 28 BBs, whatever.
It's just over 20. I had like looked at some stuff before going out, and it seemed like 20 BB reshoves. This seemed like a hand that would be in range, but I wasn't sure. And the guy who opened just had piles and piles of chips, so I thought like he could be opening reasonably wide. I think he was either first in chips at our table or second in chips at our table. Villain on the button was very recreational. Like, he just called with 4 million in his stack to this open. Like, I don't think that's really a thing. And he like tank called too. And so there's like a little bit of extra dead money out there. And I think ace 10 suited might be just in the reshove range. I don't know. But I just thought, like, given the factors of like original razor can be wide and then there's just some extra dead money out there, I just kind of thought,
yeah,
ace 10 suited, good enough. And like, you know, I think like we get a lot of folds, like maybe original razor has like 9-10 or like, I don't know, jack 10, something like that. King queen. I mean, king queen we probably get called and then we're 60-40. So like, he can have a lot of hands, I think, that we're actually pretty happy to just jam against. So I kind of just went for it.
Yeah, it seems like a nice combination of useful fold equity that you're picking up and surviving okay with this hand when called. So you also get called by some hands like 8s and 9s and things that you're doing pretty well against. So I think this is fine. I mean, at this point in the tournament, your skill edge that you have over the field, assuming that you still have one at this point, I'd imagine you do, it's just not going to be as applicable because you're so short. So you have to remember that unless you double, you're kind of in this catch-22 where you're not really able to utilize your skill edge fully anyway, and therefore like rejecting the spot by saying there will be better spots. There may be, or there may be none. So saying there will be better spots is very biased because it's kind of saying like a better spot than this will come up, but it may well not, right? And the blinds are going to go up again and the pressure's going to start mounting on your stack. I think there's every reason to take this play given that the button is wider than normal and given that you think this hand is like flirting with the idea of being able to jam in theory. So as long as this theoretical jam isn't like way off, which I'm sure it's not, there's really not that much wrong with your argument. In some percentage of the time, you are just going to get this through and you're going to increase your stack by 14, 15% or something. And that's going to feel fantastic adding that money to your stack here. So we do get called. And this is the last hand, sadly, of the review, which can only mean one thing. This is 32 people remaining at the point of this hand. And yeah, we failed to improve against ace king, and that's the end of the tournament. How does it feel can you sum up in a few sentences what the initial like minute upon busting feels like here?
Surreal. It's surreal, I guess. It all kind of felt surreal. The whole experience kind of felt surreal, and this was kind of just like the cherry on top, I guess. I don't think like most of the emotions hit me until several minutes after I had initially busted, but when it first happened, it just kind of nothing really felt all that real, I guess.
Yeah, just kind of numb, like you've not really processed anything yet. Did you go through a period of like a depression of any sort, like after busting? Because you really probably had you put everything into this, and obviously like getting a final table finish or first place or something must have been growing ever more real as this event was progressing. So what was it, if you don't mind talking about it, like what was the sort of slump like where you sort of experienced the fallout of this, of not getting that final table?
So basically, I mean, what's crazy, I've told myself this over and over, but it's like if on day one you would have told me you're going to make it to day 7 and get knocked out in 32nd, I would be super stoked. But then you get to day 7, all of a sudden first place is 30 something people away, you know, like everything's just a lot. All of a sudden it seems way more possible that you can win the thing. And so like it was a massive letdown to like get that close and then bust. Also, it's really weird. It's something I'm actually still getting over. It was just super crushing. And then like another sort of bittersweet thing about it is then like I get back into town and I go to the poker room and everybody's like, basically I'm just reliving the fact that I got so close over and over again, because everybody's like, hey man, like good job, nice run. How was it? Tell us the stories. And so like for a while, it just like, it was pretty hard. I don't know. I was just like, not in a good place for a while. Like, I was just like eating fast food and like not giving a fuck. But I realized like, dude, it's a pretty cool thing. And I'm insanely happy that I got to experience it. I wouldn't trade it for the world. But there's still a part of me that's like, damn, I wish I would have final table. Damn, I wish I would have won, you know? But, and everybody, the worst, all my non-poker friends like, well, just do it next year. And I'm like, I mean, sure, like the goal is to do it next year, but you guys don't understand that like it's like incredibly rare that you get to sort of do a deep run like that. You know, like the best players in the world maybe haven't even made a top 50 run in the main. Like it's just a tournament, you know. Tournament poker's so fickle. So
but you played so well, you didn't really put a foot wrong in the hand where you busted. You lost most of your chips on a really sick, really impressive play. I mean, there's so much to hold your head high about here, I would say, and I think like going and having a blowout and eating fast food and going out drinking or whatever you want to do while you're in Vegas and you've just finished one of the most grueling, intense experiences, work experience, professional experiences as well of your life is more than normal. You know, I can imagine like the equivalent in a normal job of like finishing a huge case or huge project or getting a promotion or whatever and putting everything into it and then you need a release, right? So I don't think it's abnormal at all when life demands that level of focus from you to then like go on a bit of a okay, I'm done with this stuff for now. I'm going to go do my own thing. But you've come back to the game now. You're playing again, presumably, and you're still enjoying being a professional poker player. Let's finish off with some advice that you may have for anyone that's where you were a few years ago, where they're maybe like into the game. They're watching this. People watching this will have an interest in poker, but they've not like gone pro. They maybe want to. You've already talked about the going pro decision and what went into that. So let's maybe talk about what advice you would give in terms of what to get right, what mistakes you should avoid, just like general decisions that you should make within your own poker career. Like what things would you recommend doing or recommend avoiding doing?
I would say get trained by somebody who knows what they're doing. Like I think nothing that I've done over the last couple of years would have been possible had I not got into contact with you.
Well, ship me half of your cash then in that case.
Yeah, sure, no problem. I'll send you a check. But I just think there's, at least for me personally, there is just like no shot that I could be where I am now had I not gotten instruction from an experienced, someone who's been there before, someone who is much better than me and understands the game much better than me and can teach me in a way that I can understand. So like, I think hiring somebody, or if you can't hire somebody, finding somebody to work with that can sort of teach you how to use a solver in a sense of like, you don't just copy what the solver does or try to copy what the solver does. Like, what does the solver output mean and how did the solver arrive at its output? Things like that. Like, it's just really easy, I think, to think you're like studying well and going down a path that's going to get you good at the game, when in reality, you're either just spinning your wheels or potentially even going in the wrong direction. So yeah, I guess that would be my main piece of advice is like find someone who knows what they're doing and have them help you.
Yeah, don't just think that you can save money by going it alone, because poker is a game in which we constantly make investments for pot share. We make an investment when we're bluffing because it gets us a certain amount of the pot that we think is higher than that which we would get by checking. And investing in poker tuition is just the same thing. You're making a bet with yourself that that's going to yield more dividend than going it alone, and it's going to be way more efficient. And it usually is, as long as you pick the right tuition. So I couldn't agree more. I think like that's why when you emailed me originally, and we'll go full circle here and wrap this up, you said, should I get coaching from you now or should I wait? And I was very much just like, why would you wait? Why would you want to try on your own, get things wrong, learn bad habits, all of that, when you could actually get off on the right footing, get the right foundation? People think, oh, I'm going to save up, I'm going to get to 50 NL, then I'm going to invest in the Carrot Poker School. And I say, no, if you can afford it now, I understand it may be out with people's budget, but if you can afford it, do it ASAP. Get the right tuition as soon as possible. I'm not going to sit here and say my school is the only thing you could possibly choose. I do think it's the best, but I'm biased. But yeah, you want to grab whatever tuition you're going to grab, or whatever coach you're going to hire early on, because you want to make sure that all your foundations are the right ones and not getting a coach or a course to undo your own bad habits. So many people have studied poker for 10 years badly, and it would have been better if they did nothing at all. It reminds me of that line in the Eminem album, the Marshall Mathers LP, where he gives his agent the album and he's like, this album is less than nothing. It'd be better if you gave me nothing at all, he says to him. It reminds me of that, where like a student with nothing is actually easier to work with than a student with like 8 years of terrible habits. A brand new student would be better. So I think you were lucky in that you took poker not very seriously, and then suddenly you took it very seriously and you made all the right choices. And I think that's why you've got to where you are so quickly. One of the reasons. I think you've also just got a great work ethic, a good mental game, and you're diligent and organized. I think those things help too. But yeah. Any final thoughts that you would... What does the future hold maybe for you in poker? Do you plan on doing this professionally for a while longer?
Yeah, I mean, just trying to get good, really. Like, just studying and trying to get better. I just want to keep playing higher and see what happens.
Yeah, so we'll check back in with you in future, man. It's been a pleasure having you on the show. It's been really fun reliving this experience and this tournament with you, and I hope you guys on YouTube have enjoyed it as well. If you have, let us know what you think in the comments. Smash the like button, subscribe to the channel. We really appreciate it. Cameron, all the best for the future. I'm sure you'll crush. And yeah, thanks so much for joining us today.
Cool. Thank you.